What the hell do you think you're doing, Maya? Marcus Blackwood's voice cracked like a whip. He had returned home 3 hours early. His chest tightened, heart hammering against his ribs as he took in the scene before him. There, on the thick Persian rug, Maya William, 29, lay on her hands and knees, and Jacob, his 5-year-old son, perched atop her back, laughing as if the world had finally returned to him. Rage, disbelief, and humiliation twisted together in Marcus's chest. Jacob's legs dangled, weak and trembling. His wheelchair abandoned in the corner as though it had no claim on him in that moment of pure joy. Jacob froze mid-giggle, uncertainty flashing across his face. "Daddy, I was just playing," he whispered, a note of fear threading through his voice. Marcus's eyes narrowed to slits. "Playing? Playing? You're letting my son ride you like some beast? Maya, are you out of your mind?" His hand shot toward the air, gesturing wildly. "Do you have any idea who he is? Who I am? This is my house. My son. And you." He stopped, swallowing hard, as he saw Maya's steady gaze meet his. I didn't mean any harm, sir," Maya said, her voice trembling but clear. In the sudden movement, Maya jerked instinctively, losing her balance, and Jacob toppled forward. A sharp cry tore from his lips, and a trickle of blood appeared on his forehead. Panic surged through Maya. "Jacob!" she cried, her voice trembling as she swept him into her arms, blood slicking her fingers. Marcus's heart stopped. "Oh my God!" he shouted, voice raw. "Someone call an ambulance, now!" A maid dashed forward, lifting Jacob gently, wrapping him in a blanket. Marcus followed, his mind racing, stomach in knots. "Are you insane?" he yelled at Maya, who sank to her knees, trembling. "Sir, I didn't mean he just slipped." Her voice quavered. Tears pricked her eyes. "I'm so sorry." "I didn't." Marcus grabbed a fistful of her hair, jerking her upright. "You incompetent, reckless, do you have any idea what you've done? Do you have any idea who you are, where you are, whose child you're risking?" His face was red, eyes burning, voice low and venomous. "You black, poor, servant dare endanger my son?" I didn't mean any harm, sir," Maya said, her voice trembling but clear. "He hasn't laughed like this in weeks. I wanted him to feel normal, even for a little while." Marcus took a step forward, jaw tight. "Normal? Normal? You let him ride on the back of a servant, on the floor of my living room, with my child's wheelchair gathering dust in the corner? Do you know what this looks like? What it says about me as a father?" Maya gasped, her knees buckling slightly from the force. "Please, sir, I'm sorry. I didn't just please don't." Her words trembled into a whisper as tears streaked down her face. Maya's vision blurred, pain shot through her scalp, but deeper than the physical ache was the humiliation. She bit her lip, trembling, recalling the sterile room and the doctor's words weeks ago. "You have a degenerative illness. There's nothing we can do. You may not live beyond your 30s. That moment, the collapse of her world, returned in a flood of fear and helplessness. Marcus, seeing her hesitation, shoved her toward the corner of the room. She hit the wall with a thud. "Do you even understand what it means to raise a child? To protect him?" he spat. "You think you can replace care, guidance, or control with play? With your foolish whims?" Maya slumped to the wall, heart pounding, every word striking like a blow. Her mind flashed to Sarah, Marcus's late wife, the friend who had trusted her to care for Jacob, the promise she had whispered. "Take care of him, Maya. Promise me." Despite her pain, her trembling, and her illness, she had sworn she would protect this child, ensure he laughed, and feel normal. Maya whimpered, pressing herself into the corner. I'm sorry. Please, don't hurt me. I didn't mean for him to get hurt." Her body shook violently, the weight of shame and fear pressing down on her. Marcus's hands shook with rage. I trusted you with my son, and you dare to..." He shoved her roughly toward the corner wall, and Maya stumbled, hitting the hard surface with a sharp gasp. "Out, you're fired. Get out of my house, now." Maya sank to her knees, sobs racking her body, hands clasped before her in desperation. Please, please forgive me. I only wanted to care for him. I promised Sarah I'd keep him safe. I promised I'd be here for Jacob. Her cries echoed through the mansion, small and pleading against the vast grandeur of the Blackwood estate. Marcus's chest heaved, the fury now tangled with grief as memories rushed in. The accident the day Sarah died, Jacob's life forever altered. The crash that left him paralyzed flashed vividly in his mind. He remembered the driver, who had given his life to save Marcus in that same tragic event. The pain, the loss, the helplessness, it all surged back in a tidal wave of fury and guilt. Maya fell to her knees once more, clutching herself, her cries echoing through the empty mansion. Please, I only wanted to keep him safe. Please, I swear, I'll do anything to make it right. The room felt impossibly heavy. Marcus's anger lingered, but beneath it, a flicker of realization stirred. Maya's trembling, her desperate sobs, her unwavering promise to care for Jacob, all of it reminded him of the sacrifices made, the losses suffered, the love that had endured even in the face of unimaginable grief. Even as she sobbed, Maya's thoughts returned to Jacob. Despite her own pain, she had to protect him, nurture him, help him feel alive in a world that had taken so much from them both. And Marcus, standing over her, finally glimpsed the truth. This woman had been carrying burdens and keeping promises that he had only just begun to understand. Marcus stood in the grand living room, chest heaving, staring at Maya as her sobs echoed off the marble walls. His hands still trembled with residual fury, his mind racing with the memories of loss, grief, and betrayal. Yet, despite the raw emotions coursing through him, his decision was firm. He turned abruptly, his tailored jacket swishing with authority as he strode toward the hallway. Get your things, he said, voice cold and final. You are done here, effective immediately. Pack your belongings. Leave my house. Maya's body stiffened, the word done cutting through her like a knife. She opened her mouth to speak, to explain, to plead, but Marcus didn't look back. His footsteps echoed behind him, deliberate and unyielding, each one a reminder that the weight of authority still rested squarely on his shoulders. The mansion, usually vibrant in its quiet luxury, felt suffocating now. The chandeliers gleamed above, indifferent to the turmoil below. Jacob, still holding the small bandage pressed to his forehead, looked from his father to Maya, confusion and fear mingling in his wide eyes. Daddy, please, he murmured, voice shaking. Don't send her away. She's my friend. Marcus paused for a fraction of a second, glancing down at his son. The sight of Jacob's tear-streaked face, the mix of innocence and courage, struck something deep within him. Yet the anger and pride that had governed his every decision in the past 2 years would not yield so easily. He knelt slightly, forcing his gaze to meet Jacob's. Jacob, this is my house, my rules. You need to understand that decisions are made for your safety. Maya has failed to uphold that. She has endangered you. Jacob shook his head, voice cracking. But she didn't. She was helping me. Marcus straightened abruptly, cutting him off. Enough. She is gone. You will understand in time. His tone left no room for debate. He turned sharply, striding past the boy and Maya, leaving both of them trembling in the center of the opulent room. Maya sank to the floor, trembling, chest heaving. She wanted to argue, to remind him of the accident, the promise she had made to Sarah, the sacrifices she had endured, the love she had for Jacob, but the words lodged in her throat, powerless against the finality of Marcus's rage. She remembered the sterile hospital room, the doctor's voice echoing her worst fears, diagnosing her own illness and reminding her how fragile her body had become. Now, here, confronted by Marcus's wrath, she felt that fragility in every shiver, every sob. A distant bell tolled somewhere in the mansion, the sound hollow and cold, as if the house itself acknowledged the fracture that had just occurred. Marcus's departure left a vacuum of silence in its wake. Jacob whimpered softly, retreating to the corner where his wheelchair sat abandoned, gripping the small stuffed animal that had been his companion for months. He looked to Maya, tears brimming, and she offered what little comfort she could, a shaky, comforting smile, hands still trembling as she reached out to brush his hair gently. Hours passed in oppressive quiet. The mansion, for all its size and splendor, felt enormous and empty. Marcus remained in his study, the door closed firmly behind him, the thick mahogany desk between him and the world outside. His mind churned with memories. He had tried to bury the accident that had stolen Sarah and left Jacob paralyzed, the heroism of Maya's late husband, who had sacrificed his own life to save Marcus. Anger had masked his guilt for years, but now it boiled to the surface in ways that made him feel both powerful and helpless. Meanwhile, Maya gathered what little she had in a worn leather bag. Each movement felt heavy, each breath a reminder of the wound to her pride and the fear for Jacob's well-being. She recalled the promises she had made to Sarah, vowing to care for Jacob, to be a presence of joy and stability. That promise had been her anchor in the storm of grief that followed her own diagnosis. Now, it felt as if the storm had intensified rather than abated. She approached Jacob, brushing her fingers along his arm, trying to convey comfort through touch. "I'll be back," she whispered, voice hoarse. "I promise I'll find a way to make it right." Her words were barely audible, swallowed by the silence that Marcus's departure had left behind. Jacob's lower lip quivered, and he shook his head. I don't want you to leave," he admitted, voice small and vulnerable. "I need you here. You make me happy." Maya knelt beside him, holding his hand tightly, eyes wet but determined. "I know, Jacob. I know. And I won't let you be alone. I'll figure it out. I swear. I'll figure it out." By late afternoon, Maya had left the mansion, stepping out into the crisp autumn air that carried the distant hum of city life. Each step on the gravel path echoed her uncertainty and fear, the weight of Marcus's fury still pressing against her chest. She remembered the nights in sterile hospital rooms, the doctors' solemn faces, the harsh realities of her own failing health, and the unrelenting promise she had made to protect Jacob no matter the cost. Like if you sympathize with Maya, and comment where you're watching this from, someone near you might be watching it too. Inside the mansion, Marcus remained seated in the study, hands pressed against his forehead, mind a turbulent storm. He thought of Jacob, so small yet so spirited, of Maya's trembling form, and of all the choices that had led to this fracture. Rage had dictated his actions, but beneath it, a cold awareness began to settle. The world was not so simple as rules, wealth, or authority. The human heart, fragile and untamed, often defied control, demanding compassion where pride sought obedience. As evening settled over the mansion, the golden light fading to a muted orange, the halls quiet except for the ticking of the antique clocks, Marcus remained alone. The echo of Maya's sobs and Jacob's small pleas haunted him, a reminder of the cost of his anger. Somewhere beyond the front gates, Maya walked steadily, carrying both her bag and the weight of her vow, determined to keep the promise she had made to the woman who had once been Marcus's wife, and to the boy who now needed her more than ever. The first chapter closed in that fragile tension, a world poised between fury and forgiveness, grief and hope, authority and love. And for Marcus Blackwood, the night offered little solace, only the echo of a lesson he had yet to learn fully. That protecting someone sometimes means letting them live and letting them choose who they trust. The morning sunlight filtered through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, casting long, pale beams across the polished marble floors. Marcus sat at his desk in the study, staring at the papers in front of him but seeing nothing. The events of the previous day played in his mind like a film. He couldn't pause Jacob's laughter, the blood on his son's forehead, Maya's trembling figure, and the raw courage in her eyes. Despite having sent her away, despite the anger that had dictated his every word, something about her refusal to back down gnawed at him. Jacob, quiet and withdrawn, remained in his room under the care of the nurses. The boy had barely touched his breakfast, poking at the eggs and toast on his tray with a fork, eyes downcast. Marcus could hear the soft hum of the caregivers moving through the hall, but the emptiness in the house was palpable. He poured himself a cup of black coffee and stared out the window at the gardens below, meticulously trimmed and orderly, a stark contrast to the chaos of emotions swirling inside him. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, Maya walked briskly through the quiet streets, the leather of her bag worn and heavy on her shoulder. Each step reminded her of the harsh words, the push into the wall, and the sting of Marcus's fury. Her mind replayed the moment the doctor had diagnosed her illness years ago, the cold, unyielding tone as he listed the prognosis. The hopelessness, the despair that had followed, had once seemed unbearable, but now, facing Marcus's wrath, it felt like a familiar shadow she couldn't escape. Yet, through it all, her promise to Sarah to care for Jacob no matter what kept her moving forward. Back inside the mansion, Marcus rose from his chair, pacing the study. His anger had not subsided entirely, but something had shifted. The memory of Jacob, perched on Maya's back, laughing freely despite the accident, refused to leave him. Marcus sank into a nearby armchair, resting his forehead on his hand, and finally allowed himself to think beyond the rage. He remembered the crash, the twisted metal, the sirens, Sarah's last breath, Jacob's tiny body in the hospital hooked up to machines, and the selfless courage of Maya's late husband, the driver who had given his life to save him. The weight of that debt, of that sacrifice, settled heavily in his chest. He rubbed his eyes and muttered under his breath, I can't keep doing this." The walls of the study seemed to close in, the grandeur of wealth and status meaningless against the quiet, unyielding truth. He had failed to see what truly mattered. Jacob needed more than tutors and protection. He needed joy, companionship, and love, the very things Maya had offered him, despite her own suffering. Hours passed, and still, Marcus did nothing. The anger had not vanished, but it had softened, replaced by an uneasy mixture of guilt and realization. He could not call Maya back, at least. Not yet. He had sent her away. He had humiliated her. But the thought of Jacob's small voice, pleading for her to stay, tugged at something in him that he could not ignore. By late afternoon, Marcus forced himself to leave the study. He wandered the empty halls, each step heavy, and peered into Jacob's room. The boy was curled under a soft blanket, eyes wide but filled with sadness, a stark reminder of the cost of yesterday's decisions. Marcus knelt beside him, reaching out slowly. "Jacob, he stopped, unsure how to bridge the chasm his anger had created. Jacob looked up, eyes full of hurt. "You sent her away," he said softly, voice breaking. "I wanted her to stay. She makes me happy, Daddy. She makes me feel like me." Marcus swallowed hard, guilt rising like a tide. He could see the truth in Jacob's eyes, something he had overlooked for far too long. He pressed a hand to his son's shoulder. "I know," he whispered. I didn't understand. I was wrong." Jacob's eyes filled with tears, and he reached for his stuffed bear, clutching it to his chest. I want her to come back," he murmured. "I don't want to be alone." Marcus sat back on the edge of the bed, the quiet of the room pressing down on him. He knew that sending Maya away had been both an act of anger and an act of pride. Yet now, in the stillness, he realized that pride had nothing to do with love or care. Protecting Jacob meant more than enforcing rules. It meant understanding, listening, and sometimes letting go of control. Outside, Maya had found a quiet corner in a small park. She sat on a weathered bench, staring at the ground, trying to calm her racing heart. Every detail from the mansion, the push into the wall, Jacob's small hands, Marcus's enraged face replayed in her mind. And yet, beneath the fear and shame, she held fast to her promise. She would care for Jacob. She would keep him safe, happy, and loved, even if the man who held power over her life despised her. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the park, Maya closed her eyes and let herself remember Sarah, her friend's laughter, her kindness, the way she had entrusted Maya with her son's happiness before she had passed. That memory, bittersweet but strong, grounded her. She would not falter. She could not falter. Back at the mansion, Marcus finally rose from Jacob's bedside and walked to the window. He gazed out at the distant city, its skyline glowing in the amber twilight. His mind raced with possibilities, with regrets, and with the stark reality of what he had lost for a moment. Jacob's happiness, the trust of Maya, and the simple joy of fatherhood. He clenched his fists, realizing that letting Maya go had not solved anything. It had only created a vacuum in the household, one that could not be filled by wealth, tutors, or pristine order. In that quiet, golden light, Marcus understood that he would have to face his mistakes if not for himself, then for Jacob. The evening settled over the Blackwood mansion, silent except for the soft ticking of clocks, the occasional creak of the grand staircase, and the distant hum of the city. Inside, Marcus remained alone, brooding, while outside, Maya's resolve strengthened with every passing minute. Both were caught in the fragile balance of anger, regret, and duty, a balance that would soon demand confrontation, understanding, and perhaps a measure of forgiveness. The next morning, sunlight streamed through the towering windows of the Blackwood mansion, painting golden streaks across the polished marble floors. Marcus Blackwood stood in the study, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the city skyline beyond the glass. His mind was a tempest, replaying yesterday's chaos. Jacob's laughter, the blood trickling from his forehead, Maya's trembling form, and her desperate pleas. Despite having dismissed her, the image of her unwavering courage haunted him. He had sent her away in anger, yes, but the reality of her absence now pressed down on him with a weight he could not ignore. Jacob remained in his room, silent and withdrawn. The boy sat perched on the edge of his bed, a small blanket around his shoulders, staring at the floor. His breakfast lay untouched, eggs cold, toast abandoned. The nurses moved quietly, careful not to disturb him, but even their presence could not mask the emptiness that hung over him. Marcus could hear the soft shuffle of their feet down the long hallway, but the mansion itself felt oppressively silent, almost mourning Maya's absence. Marcus paced the study, his polished shoes tapping a steady rhythm against the marble. Anger still simmered beneath his chest, but it was tempered by a gnawing guilt he could not shake. He remembered the crash, the hospital room filled with the sterile scent of antiseptic, the helplessness as he watched Sarah slip from life, and Jacob's fragile body hooked to monitors. Maya's husband, the driver, had died to save him, and she had endured unimaginable loss as a result. And now, yesterday, in her attempt to bring Jacob happiness, she had been struck down by his wrath. He paused, resting a hand on the mahogany desk, staring at a framed photograph of Sarah smiling at Jacob in the garden years ago. The memory of her warmth, her laughter, the way she had trusted Maya to care for her son, pressed heavily on him. Marcus realized, with a sudden pang, that he had been blind not only to Maya's sacrifice but to the very essence of what his son needed. Jacob did not need wealth, tutors, or carefully managed schedules. He needed joy, companionship, and love, the very things Maya had given him, even at risk to her own health and pride. Meanwhile, Maya walked through the quiet streets outside the city, her bag heavy on her shoulder. Each step reminded her of the humiliation she had endured, the shove into the wall, the harsh words, Marcus's fury, and of her own fragile health. Diagnosed years ago, in a sterile hospital room. Her mind flickered to that day, the doctor's solemn tone, the diagnosis that threatened to cut her life short. She had survived loss before, she told herself, and she would survive this too. Her promise to Sarah, to care for Jacob no matter what, remained unbroken. She paused at a small park bench, the crisp autumn air brushing against her face. Sitting down, she closed her eyes and let herself remember Sarah's laughter, the trust she had placed in Maya to watch over Jacob, to nurture his happiness. She repeated the promise in her mind like a mantra. I will care for him. I will keep him safe. I will not fail. The tears came unbidden, her body trembling, but beneath the fear and sorrow, a fierce determination burned. Back inside the mansion, Marcus finally approached Jacob's room. He knocked lightly on the door before entering, and the boy looked up, eyes filled with a mixture of fear, hurt, and longing. Marcus knelt beside him, voice quiet, trembling slightly. Jacob, I've been thinking about yesterday. Jacob's eyes widened, uncertainty and hope mingling in their depths. Daddy, he whispered, I wanted Maya to stay. She makes me happy. She makes me feel like a real kid. Marcus swallowed hard, guilt pressing down on him like a physical weight. I know, he said softly. I didn't understand. I thought I was protecting you. But I see now. I've been holding you back. His hand hovered over Jacob's shoulder, uncertain, before resting lightly, hesitant, but sincere. The boy's lower lip quivered, and he clutched the small stuffed bear he always kept close. I want her to come back," Jacob murmured. "I don't want to be alone." Marcus's chest tightened. He had spent years enforcing rules and maintaining control, believing that wealth and authority were the solutions to every problem. Yet now, confronted by Jacob's innocence, his needs, and the absence of Maya's presence, he realized how little he truly understood. Protecting someone, he thought, was not about controlling every moment. It was about understanding, listening, and sometimes letting go of pride. He remained by Jacob's side, silent for a few moments, considering the impossible choice before him. Marcus could recall the accident, the sacrifices, the life lost, and the responsibility that weighed on him. He could also feel the emptiness that Maya's absence had created in the house, a void that neither wealth nor authority could fill. The mansion, vast and elegant, seemed smaller now, hollowed out by the distance between father and son, and the absence of the one who had brought genuine joy into their lives. Outside, Maya's resolve solidified. Sitting on the park bench, she wiped her eyes, drew in a steadying breath, and made a silent vow. She would find a way to return. She would ensure Jacob's happiness, protect him, and honor the promise she had made to Sarah. The path ahead was uncertain, but her determination was unwavering. Back in the mansion, Marcus remained by the window, staring at the skyline as the afternoon sun cast long shadows across the floors. The air was heavy, silent except for the soft ticking of the antique clock and the faint hum of the city beyond the gates. He understood, in the quiet, that his anger had resolved nothing. The child's happiness, the trust and courage of Maya, could not be replaced by wealth, control, or punishment. The lesson had begun, and Marcus knew he would have to face it, confront it, and perhaps find a way to make amends. The day waned, the golden light fading to amber, leaving Marcus alone with his thoughts and regrets. Outside, Maya walked steadily through the city streets, carrying her bag and her vow, each step a testament to the promise she had made, and the love and courage that had already begun to shape Jacob's world. The morning air in the city was crisp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and the faint aroma of fresh coffee from nearby cafes. Maya walked briskly along the sidewalk, each step heavy with fatigue and the ache of yesterday's humiliation, but her resolve remained unbroken. Her thoughts returned repeatedly to Jacob, the small boy who had trusted her, who had laughed freely under her care for the first time in months. She had promised Sarah, and she would honor that promise, no matter the obstacles. Inside the Blackwood mansion, Marcus moved through the empty halls with a restless energy. The echoes of his footsteps mirrored the turmoil in his mind. He had sent Maya away, and yet her absence gnawed at him, a persistent ache that refused to fade. He replayed the scene of Jacob perched on her back, her trembling hands, the small trickle of blood images that had burned themselves into his memory. His fury had been justified, perhaps, in his own mind, but now he began to question the cost of that anger. Jacob sat quietly at the breakfast table, barely touching his eggs. The nurses offered gentle smiles and soft words, but nothing could fill the void left by Maya's absence. His small hands rested on the table, fingers tracing the wood grain as if seeking comfort in its stability. I wish she were here," he murmured to no one in particular, the words almost lost in the quiet room. Marcus appeared in the doorway, watching his son for a moment before speaking. "Jacob." His voice was quieter than usual, almost hesitant. Jacob looked up, eyes wide and glistening. Marcus swallowed hard. "I know you wanted Maya here." He paused, searching for words that would not diminish his authority, but might convey something of his understanding. "I sent her away because I thought it was the right thing. But I realize now that I may have made a mistake." Jacob's lower lip trembled. "A mistake?" he asked softly, uncertain. "Daddy, she's the only one who makes me feel normal." Marcus sighed, the weight of the past 2 years pressing on him. He remembered the accident in vivid detail, the twisted metal, the sirens, Sarah's hand cold in his own, and the heroic act of Maya's late husband, the driver, who had sacrificed himself to save Marcus. The memories brought a pang of guilt that twisted deep in his chest. He had protected Jacob, Yes, but in doing so, he had also imprisoned him in a world devoid of laughter and companionship. Meanwhile, Maya found a quiet bench in a small park overlooking a narrow river, the water reflecting the orange and gold of the autumn leaves. She sat down heavily, bag at her side, and allowed herself a moment to breathe. Her body still ached from the shove in the wall, her hair still messy from the previous day, but her determination was unwavering. She would find a way to care for Jacob, to ensure his happiness, even if it meant standing against Marcus Blackwood himself. Her mind drifted to the hospital, the moment the doctor had delivered the diagnosis of her illness. The sterile room, the cold, measured words, the certainty that she might not have much time left, all of it had nearly crushed her spirit. And yet, it was that very fragility that had given her a sense of urgency, a drive to keep her promise to Sarah. She had vowed to care for Jacob, to ensure he experienced joy and love, no matter what. Back at the mansion, Marcus finally returned to his study, pouring himself a second cup of coffee. The liquid was bitter, grounding, but it could not dissolve the unease he felt. He thought of Jacob's small hands, his earnest gaze, and the fragile thread of happiness Maya had provided. Marcus realized that he could not simply replace her with tutors, schedules, or rules. Happiness, he understood now, could not be manufactured, it had to be nurtured, and sometimes that meant setting aside pride and anger. The day wore on, each hour stretching with an almost unbearable quiet. Jacob remained withdrawn, and Marcus found himself wandering from room to room, haunted by his own rigidity and by Maya's absence. Outside, the city moved on in oblivion to the drama that had unfolded within the walls of the mansion. Maya, however, felt every moment acutely, each step carrying her closer to a plan, a path to return and fulfill the promise that weighed upon her like a living thing. By late afternoon, Marcus made his way back to Jacob's room. He found the boy curled on his bed, small fists clutching the blanket, eyes wide and searching. Marcus knelt beside him, voice low and tentative. "Jacob, I need you to understand something." Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his expression. I may have been wrong yesterday. I didn't see what you needed. I only saw rules, control, and order. But maybe I failed to see what truly matters." Jacob's small hands reached out instinctively, gripping his father's arm. "Daddy, will she come back?" he asked, voice trembling with longing. Marcus hesitated. He could not yet promise that, not without confronting his own pride, his anger, and the memories that had driven him to push Maya away. But he could not ignore the truth either. "I don't know yet, Jacob," he admitted, voice cracking slightly. "But I'm starting to understand." Outside, Maya's thoughts remained with Jacob, with the mansion, and with Marcus. She knew the path ahead would be fraught with difficulty, but she would not falter. Every memory of Sarah, every promise made, every ounce of courage she possessed would guide her. She had been sent away, yes, but her duty, her love, and her determination would not be denied. As night began to settle over the city, the mansion remained quiet, filled with shadows and the weight of unsaid words. Marcus sat alone in the study, Jacob asleep in his room, and Maya moving steadily through the city streets, all three caught in the fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope. The day had passed, but the lesson had only begun. Protecting those we love often requires humility, understanding, and the willingness to see beyond pride. The morning light crept through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, falling in sharp lines across the marble floors. Marcus Blackwood sat at his desk, staring at the papers before him, though his eyes saw only shadows and memories. The events of the past days refused to leave him. Jacob's laughter, the blood from his forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, and the fierce courage she had shown, despite having dismissed her. Marcus could not shake the gnawing awareness of what her absence had created. A silence in the mansion far heavier than the opulent walls should have allowed. Jacob remained upstairs, his small frame curled beneath blankets in his room. The boy's breakfast had gone largely untouched, eggs cooling on the plate, toast stiff and dry. His hands fidgeted with the edge of the blanket, eyes downcast as if trying to disappear into its folds. The nurses moved silently, offering soft reassurances, but even their presence could not fill the emptiness left by Maya's absence. He missed her already, the way she had laughed with him, guided him, and made him feel like a child with possibilities rather than limitations. Marcus rose and began pacing the study, hands clasped behind his back, mind racing. He remembered the accident, the twisted metal, the sound of sirens, Sarah's hand slipping from his grasp, Jacob's tiny body hooked to monitors, and Maya's husband sacrificing himself to save him. Rage, grief, and guilt intertwined in a knot too tight to untangle easily. He had sent Maya away in anger, yet the memory of her bravery, her dedication, and her unwavering focus on Jacob's happiness left a hollow ache in his chest. He stopped before a large window overlooking the gardens. The sunlight glinted off the neatly trimmed hedges, the fountains, and the walkways lined with meticulously placed stones. Everything appeared perfect, orderly, controlled. But Marcus knew better. He had been controlling, yes, but he had failed to recognize what mattered most. Jacob needed joy, freedom, and companionship, not merely protection and rules. Maya had provided all three, even at risk to her health and reputation. Meanwhile, Maya had taken refuge in a small cafe across town. She sat in a quiet corner, the steam from her coffee rising in thin spirals as she considered her next steps. Her hands still trembled from the shove against the mansion wall, her body aching from the confrontation. Yet her mind was resolute. She had promised Sarah she would care for Jacob. That promise had carried her through her own diagnosis and the grief of losing her husband. Now, it was all that anchored her as she considered the impossibility of returning to the Blackwood mansion. Back at the mansion, Marcus wandered through the quiet halls, each echoing step a reminder of his son's small voice pleading for Maya. He remembered Jacob's earnest gaze, the small hand clutching his sleeve, and the tears that had silently streaked down the boy's cheeks. The anger that had dominated him yesterday now felt hollow, hollowed out by the stark realization of what he had dismissed and the joy he had inadvertently stolen from his child. Jacob, feeling the absence of both Maya and his father's attention, wandered to the window, pressing his small hands against the glass. Outside, the late morning sun illuminated the gardens below. Yet to him, they felt distant, unwelcoming. "I wish she were here," he whispered, voice trembling. "I wish Daddy could see. She's the only one who makes me happy." Marcus returned to the study and, for the first time in years, allowed himself to sit quietly and reflect. The mansion, with all its grandeur, seemed suddenly oppressive and cold. No amount of wealth could replace the warmth of human connection. The lesson he had avoided, masked by pride and control, had begun to emerge. True care required more than rules, more than authority. It required humility, understanding, and the willingness to recognize what the heart truly needs. Hours passed in contemplative silence. Marcus poured himself another cup of coffee, the bitterness grounding him, though it could not mask the awareness that his decisions had consequences beyond what he had considered. Jacob's happiness, Maya's dignity, and the lessons of loss and sacrifice had all become intertwined in ways he could no longer ignore. By mid-afternoon, Marcus approached Jacob's room once more. The boy was curled beneath the blankets, eyes wide but filled with sorrow and longing. Marcus knelt beside him, voice low, careful not to overwhelm. "Jacob, I need you to understand something." Jacob looked up, hope and fear mingling in his expression. I wanted Maya to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." Marcus reached out, resting a hand lightly on his son's shoulder. "I know," he said, voice thick. I may have been wrong. I sent her away in anger. But I'm beginning to see that happiness cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need joy, and I failed to see that." Jacob's small hands gripped the blanket, and he let out a soft sigh, tears brimming in his eyes. I want her to come back." Marcus nodded slowly, a quiet acknowledgement of the truth he could not yet speak aloud. He had sent away someone who had loved and nurtured his child, and now he would have to face the consequences of that decision. The day stretched on, heavy and still. each moment a reminder that anger and pride could never replace the warmth of trust, love, and care. Outside, Maya's resolve continued to harden. Sitting on the park bench, she wiped her eyes, feeling the chill of the autumn air but welcoming its clarity. She had been sent away, yes, but she would not abandon her promise to Jacob. Each memory of Sarah, each moment of courage and love, strengthened her resolve to return, to protect, and to nurture the boy who needed her more than ever. As night fell over the city, the mansion remained silent and still, filled with shadows and the weight of unspoken regrets. Marcus sat alone in the study, Jacob asleep in his room, and Maya moving purposefully through the streets, all caught in the fragile balance of anger, guilt, and hope. The lesson had begun, the path ahead uncertain, but the hearts involved were already in motion toward understanding, reconciliation, and the love that had been so nearly lost. The next morning, sunlight spilled through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, gilding the marble floors and casting long shadows along the polished walls. Marcus Blackwood sat at his desk in the study, fingers drumming lightly on the dark wood surface. The house was quiet, almost eerily so, and the absence of Maya William weighed heavily on him. Though he had sent her away, the memory of her courage, her unwavering care for Jacob, and the way she had risked herself to bring the boy joy refused to leave his thoughts. Jacob, meanwhile, sat at the breakfast table, eyes downcast as he poked at his food. The eggs on his plate were cold, and the toast had hardened in the morning air. He clutched a small stuffed bear tightly to his chest, seeking comfort in the familiar softness. The nurses moved about quietly, offering soft smiles and gentle words, but nothing could replace Maya's presence, the laughter, the warmth, the sense that he could simply be a child. Marcus rose and began pacing, each step echoing off the marble floors. He remembered the scene of Jacob atop Maya's back, the blood trickling down the boy's forehead, and the fear that had gripped him. Anger had driven his actions, but now, in the cold light of morning, that anger seemed hollow. He recalled the crash, the twisted metal, the sirens, Sarah's pale hand slipping from his own, and Maya's late husband sacrificing himself to save him. The memories surged through him, a painful reminder of the cost of life and love intertwined. He paused at the window, looking down at the gardens below. Everything was meticulously ordered, precise, and controlled, yet it all seemed meaningless compared to the chaos of human emotion and connection he had witnessed. Marcus realized, with an ache he could not ignore, that Jacob needed more than rules and protection. He needed laughter, companionship, and the freedom to experience joy, things that Maya had given him even at risk to herself. Outside, Maya moved steadily through the city streets, bag slung over her shoulder, her mind replaying every moment from the previous day. She remembered the push against the wall, the harsh words, the tears she had shed, and the promises she had made to Sarah. Despite her illness and the humiliation she had suffered, she remained determined. Jacob needed her. She would find a way to return, to protect him, and to nurture his happiness, no matter the obstacles. Inside the mansion, Marcus finally approached Jacob's room. He knelt beside his son, voice quieter than usual, almost hesitant. "Jacob, I need you to understand something," he said. The boy looked up, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I wanted Maya to stay," Jacob whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel like a real kid." Marcus swallowed hard, guilt tightening his chest. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away yesterday because I was angry, and perhaps because I was afraid. But I see now that happiness cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need joy. And I failed to see that." Jacob's eyes filled with tears. I want her to come back," he murmured, voice trembling. Marcus remained silent for a moment, feeling the weight of his own pride and the enormity of what he had dismissed. He reached out slowly, resting a hand on Jacob's shoulder. I don't know if that can happen yet," he admitted, "but I am beginning to understand." "Oh," Jacob clutched the blanket closer, a small sigh escaping his lips. "Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded slowly, the acknowledgement of truth heavy in his chest. He could not yet promise Maya's return, but he knew he had to confront his own pride, his anger, and the memories that had driven him to push her away. The day stretched on, heavy with silence, as both father and son processed the absence and the realization of what truly mattered. Outside, Maya sat on a bench in a quiet park, the chill of the morning air doing little to cool her racing heart. She thought of Jacob, of the mansion, of the promise she had made to Sarah. Despite being sent away, she remained steadfast. Every memory of her friend, every moment of courage and love, strengthened her resolve to return and protect the boy who needed her more than ever. As night fell, the city lights blinked on one by one, casting a golden glow over the streets. Marcus remained in the study, alone with his thoughts and regrets. Jacob slept fitfully upstairs, and Maya moved steadily through the streets, carrying her vow and determination. All three were caught in a fragile balance of anger, guilt, and hope. The lesson had begun, and the path toward understanding, reconciliation, and love had only just opened. The morning light arrived pale and muted, filtering through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion and spilling across the marble floors. Marcus Blackwood stood in the study, gazing out at the distant city skyline. Despite the ordered perfection of his world, a gnawing emptiness had settled in his chest. Maya's absence was not just noticeable, it was a wound. Her courage, her care for Jacob, and the unwavering dedication she had shown weighed heavily on him. He had sent her away in a storm of anger and pride, yet the memory of her defiance and commitment refused to leave his mind. Jacob sat quietly in his room, his small body curled beneath the soft blankets, hands clutching the edges tightly. His breakfast lay untouched, a cold plate of eggs and toast, and the usual cheerful chatter of the nurses was unable to pierce the melancholy that had settled over him. He missed Maya. He missed the freedom she had given him, the joy, the laughter, and the simple assurance that someone truly saw him. Marcus moved through the empty halls, each step echoing against the polished marble floors. He recalled the blood trickling down Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling hands as she tried to steady him, and the raw intensity of her pleas for understanding. Anger had dictated his actions yesterday, but now the hollow ache of guilt settled in, stark and undeniable. He remembered the accident, the crash, Sarah's final moments, Jacob's fragile body hooked to machines, and the selfless sacrifice of Maya's late husband. The weight of those memories had shaped him, but it had also blinded him to the needs of his son. He stopped before the window overlooking the gardens below, the sunlight casting long shadows over the perfectly trimmed hedges and fountains. Everything appeared controlled, ordered, perfect, but Marcus knew that control had cost him more than he could have imagined. Jacob needed more than schedules and rules. He needed joy, freedom, and companionship. Maya had given him those things, even at the cost of her own pride and safety. Outside the mansion, Maya walked briskly through the quiet streets, her bag, worn and heavy, pressed against her shoulder as her thoughts returned constantly to Jacob. She remembered the push against the wall, the harsh words, and the humiliation of Marcus's anger. She thought of the hospital room years ago, when the doctor delivered the diagnosis of her illness with cold certainty, threatening to end her time far too soon. That memory had nearly crushed her, but it had also given her a purpose: to care for Jacob, to protect his happiness, and to honor the promise she had made to Sarah. Maya paused at a small park, sitting on a bench overlooking a narrow river, reflecting the gold and amber of the autumn trees. She closed her eyes and let herself breathe, letting the cool air clear her mind. She repeated her promise to herself, to Jacob, and to Sarah. She would not abandon the boy. No matter the obstacles, no matter Marcus's anger, she would find a way to return and fulfill her vow. Back inside the mansion, Marcus finally approached Jacob's room. The boy sat curled on the bed, gripping his blanket tightly. Marcus knelt beside him, his voice softer than usual, though still carrying the authority that had defined him. "Jacob, I need you to understand something," he said. Jacob looked up, a glimmer of hope in his large brown eyes. I wanted Maya to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel like a real kid." Marcus's chest tightened. "I know," he said, voice thick. "I sent her away yesterday in anger. I thought I was protecting you. but I realize now that I may have been wrong. Happiness, joy, it cannot be dictated by rules or control. You need those things, and I failed to see it. Jacob's lip trembled, and he clutched the stuffed bear tighter to his chest. I want her to come back, he murmured. Marcus reached out, placing a hand lightly on his son's shoulder. I don't know yet if that can happen, he admitted, but I am beginning to understand, and I promise you, I will think very carefully about what comes next. Outside, Maya lifted her head from the bench. She had spent hours in thought, planning her return, determined to keep her promise. The autumn air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it, focusing on Jacob and the task she had sworn to complete. Every memory of Sarah, every act of love and courage, strengthened her resolve. Back in the mansion, Marcus returned to the study, pouring a fresh cup of coffee, bitter and grounding. He could not yet forgive himself fully, nor could he summon the courage to call Maya back. But the absence she left behind, the silence in the halls, and the emptiness in Jacob's eyes had begun to teach him something essential. Protection without understanding is nothing but imprisonment. Love required humility, listening, and, sometimes, letting go of pride. As night fell, the city lights blinked on, and the mansion settled into quiet shadows. Marcus sat alone, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moving purposefully through the streets, each step a commitment to her promise. The stage was set for confrontation, understanding, and the first steps toward forgiveness and the restoration of joy in Jacob's life. The next morning, the Blackwood mansion was still and heavy with the weight of yesterday's events. Marcus Blackwood sat at his desk in the study, hands folded tightly, eyes staring out at the city beyond the towering windows. Despite the perfection of his surroundings, the polished marble, the gleaming chandeliers, the meticulous gardens below, he felt a hollowness he could not ignore. Maya's absence was a void that neither wealth nor control could fill, and Jacob's quiet demeanor reminded him daily of what had been lost. Jacob sat at the breakfast table, poking at his eggs and toast with little interest. The nurses moved around him quietly, offering soft smiles and gentle words, but the boy's eyes were vacant, fixed on nothing in particular. He missed Maya. He missed her warmth, her laughter, the way she had allowed him to be a child rather than a carefully controlled project of schedules and rules. The small stuffed bear he clutched felt inadequate against the emptiness left behind. Marcus rose and began pacing, his polished shoes echoing on the marble floors. Anger had been his immediate response when Maya had faltered. But now, as he replayed the scene, the blood on Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, her courage, he began to recognize the truth he had ignored. She had risked herself not for recognition or reward, but for his son's happiness. He had dismissed her, fired her, yet the weight of her absence made the decision feel hollow, almost cruel. He paused at the window, gazing down at the gardens. Everything was orderly, perfect, a testament to his control over his world. But control, he realized, had blinded him to the very thing he was meant to nurture, Jacob's joy. Maya had given him laughter, companionship, a sense of freedom he had never permitted, and he had cast her aside in a fit of pride and rage. Outside, Maya walked briskly through the quiet streets, her bag heavy with her few belongings. She remembered the shove into the wall, the harsh words, and the humiliation she had endured, but she drew strength from the promise she had made to Sarah. She had vowed to care for Jacob, to ensure he felt joy and love, regardless of the obstacles. Her resolve was steadfast, fueled by memory and determination. She would return. She would not abandon her promise. Marcus finally approached Jacob's room. The boy was sitting on the bed, eyes wide with a mixture of sadness and longing. Marcus knelt beside him, voice softer than usual. "Jacob, I know you wanted Maya to stay," he began, hesitant. "I sent her away because I was angry, because I thought I was protecting you, but I realize now that I may have been wrong. Happiness, joy, they cannot be dictated by rules alone. You need them." Jacob's lip quivered, and he clutched his stuffed bear tightly. I want her to come back," he whispered. Marcus's chest tightened. He reached out a tentative hand, resting it lightly on Jacob's shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he admitted, "but I am beginning to understand, and I promise, I will consider what comes next very carefully." Jacob's eyes searched his father's face, hope flickering amidst the sadness. "Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes me feel normal." Marcus nodded slowly, the acknowledgement of truth heavy in his chest. He could not yet call Maya back, not without confronting his pride in the memories that had fueled his anger. But the emptiness in the house, the silence in Jacob's laughter, and the absence of Maya's warmth reminded him that wealth, rules, and authority could not replace human connection. Meanwhile, Maya had reached a small park, settling onto a worn bench overlooking the river. The water reflected the gold and amber of the autumn trees, and she allowed herself a deep breath. Every memory of Sarah, every promise, every act of courage and love fortified her resolve. She would not abandon Jacob. She would find a way to return, to protect him, and to nurture the happiness he deserved. Back in the mansion, Marcus returned to the study, pouring a fresh cup of coffee. The bitterness grounded him, but it did not dull the ache of guilt and recognition. He knew he had sent away someone who had loved and nurtured his child, someone who had acted with courage and selflessness. The lesson was clear. Protection without understanding is imprisonment. Love required humility, empathy, and, sometimes, surrendering control. As night fell over the city, the mansion settled into quiet shadows. Marcus sat alone, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moving steadily through the streets, all caught in the delicate balance of anger, regret, and hope. The stage was set for reconciliation, understanding, and the gradual restoration of joy to Jacob's life. The path ahead was uncertain, but for the first time, Marcus could see the direction he needed to take, guided by love, guilt, and the faint, persistent memory of Maya's courage. The morning sun filtered softly through the tall windows of the Blackwood mansion, casting golden light across the polished marble floors. Marcus Blackwood sat in his study, hands wrapped around a cup of black coffee, staring blankly at the skyline beyond the windows. His mind churned with the events of the past week. Jacob perched on Maya's back, the blood on his son's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, and her unwavering courage. The mansion, so carefully ordered and controlled, now felt hollow, echoing with the absence of the one person who had brought true joy to his son. Jacob remained in his room, curled beneath his blankets. His breakfast had gone untouched, the eggs were cold, the toast hardened. He held his stuffed bear close, seeking comfort in the familiar softness, yet the emptiness was palpable. The nurses moved quietly, offering soft encouragement, but nothing could fill the void Maya had left behind. The laughter and warmth she had brought to his life had vanished, leaving only a silence that weighed heavily on the boy. Marcus rose from his chair and paced the marble floors, the sound of his polished shoes echoing in the quiet halls. Anger had dictated his actions when he had sent Maya away, but now guilt and reflection had taken its place. He remembered the crash, the twisted metal, the sirens, Sarah's lifeless hand slipping from his own, Jacob's fragile body hooked up to machines, and the heroism of Maya's late husband, who had sacrificed himself to save Marcus. Those memories intertwined with his current realization. He had failed to see what truly mattered for Jacob's happiness. He paused by the window, gazing down at the meticulously maintained gardens. Everything appeared perfect, ordered, and controlled. Yet it felt meaningless without Jacob's laughter and Maya's presence. He understood now that control had cost him more than he could have imagined. Jacob needed more than rules and protection. He needed joy, companionship, and freedom, the very things Maya had given him, even at risk to herself. Outside, Maya walked briskly through the quiet streets. Her bag pressed against her shoulder, worn and heavy, yet her determination remained unbroken. She replayed the shove, the wall, the harsh words, and her humiliation. But she drew strength from her promise to Sarah to care for Jacob, to protect his happiness no matter what. She had endured loss before, survived the diagnosis of her illness, and she would endure this challenge as well. She would return to Jacob, no matter the obstacles. Back inside the mansion, Marcus finally entered Jacob's room. The boy sat on the bed, clutching his blanket, eyes wide with sadness and longing. Marcus knelt beside him, voice quiet and tentative. "Jacob, I need you to understand something," he said. Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I wanted Maya to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel like a real kid." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away in anger. I thought I was protecting you, but I see now that I may have been wrong. Happiness cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need it." Jacob's lip quivered as he clutched his bear. I want her to come back," he murmured. Marcus reached out, resting a hand lightly on Jacob's shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he said softly. "But I am beginning to understand. And I promise, I will think carefully about what comes next." Jacob's eyes searched his father's hope and longing intertwined. "Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes me feel normal." Marcus nodded, the weight of truth pressing heavily on him. He could not yet bring Maya back, but he knew he had to confront his own pride, anger, and the memories that had driven him to push her away. The mansion felt colder, emptier, and the lesson was undeniable. Protection without understanding is nothing but imprisonment. Love required humility, empathy, and the courage to acknowledge mistakes. Meanwhile, Maya rested on a bench in a quiet park, the crisp autumn air biting at her cheeks. She closed her eyes, remembering Sarah, her promise to care for Jacob, and the courage she had summoned in the face of loss. Though she had been sent away, she refused to falter. Every step, every breath was guided by the vow she had made to return to Jacob and nurture the joy he deserved. As night fell, the city lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the streets. Marcus remained in the study, alone with his thoughts. Jacob slept fitfully upstairs, and Maya moved purposefully through the quiet avenues, each step a commitment to her promise. The delicate balance of anger, regret, and hope hung in the air, poised on the cusp of change, as all three were drawn inexorably toward confrontation, understanding, and the first steps toward restoration of joy and trust. The following morning, the Blackwood mansion felt even quieter than usual. Marcus Blackwood moved through the halls with a restless energy, each polished step echoing off the marble floors. The house, usually alive with the rhythm of daily routines, now seemed hollow, haunted by the absence of Maya William and the silence she had left behind. His mind replayed every detail of the confrontation. Jacob's laughter, the blood on his son's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, and her unyielding courage. Despite having dismissed her, Marcus could not shake the gnawing awareness of the gap her departure had created. Jacob sat quietly in his room, staring out the window. The sunlight reflected off the polished floors, but it brought him no comfort. He clutched his small stuffed bear, turning it over in his hands as though its familiarity could shield him from the emptiness that surrounded him. Breakfast remained untouched on the tray beside him, a reminder that the absence of Maya's care was more than physical. It was emotional, a loss he could not articulate. Marcus paced the study, his mind racing. He had sent Maya away in anger, but the more he thought about it, the more he realized the depth of her impact on Jacob's life. He remembered the accident vividly, the twisted metal, the wailing sirens, Sarah's hand slipping from his grasp, Jacob's tiny body hooked to monitors, and the heroic sacrifice of Maya's late husband. Those memories had shaped him, but they had also blinded him to the needs of his son. He stopped at the window, looking down at the gardens below. Everything was controlled, ordered, perfect, and yet it felt meaningless without Jacob's laughter and Maya's presence. He understood now that Jacob needed more than schedules and rules. He needed joy, freedom, and companionship, the very things Maya had offered him even at the cost of her own pride and health. Outside, Maya walked steadily through the quiet streets, her bag heavy on her shoulder. Every step reminded her of the confrontation at the mansion, the shove into the wall, the harsh words, the sting of humiliation. Yet she drew strength from her promise to Sarah, to care for Jacob, to ensure his happiness, no matter what. Her illness, her own fears, and the humiliation she had endured only reinforced her determination. She would return. She could not abandon the boy who had come to rely on her. Back in the mansion, Marcus entered Jacob's room quietly. The boy was curled on the bed, hugging his bear tightly, eyes wide with longing and sadness. Marcus knelt beside him, voice softer than usual. "Jacob, I need you to understand something," he said. Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I wanted Maya to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away yesterday because I was angry, because I thought I was protecting you. But I realize now that I may have been wrong. Happiness, joy, they cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need them, and I failed to see that." Jacob's lip quivered as he held his bear closer. I want her to come back," he said softly. Marcus placed a hand lightly on Jacob's shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he admitted. "But I am beginning to understand. And I promise, I will consider what comes next very carefully." Jacob's eyes searched his father's face, hope and vulnerability intertwined. "Please, Daddy, she's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded, a knot tightening in his chest. He could not yet summon the courage to call Maya back, not without confronting his own pride and anger. But he knew that the absence of Maya, the silence in Jacob's laughter, and the emptiness in the house were powerful reminders that authority and wealth could never replace true connection. Outside, Maya rested on a park bench, the autumn air cool against her skin. She closed her eyes, letting the sounds of the city fade, and thought of Sarah, her promise, and Jacob. Despite being sent away, she remained steadfast. Every memory of courage, love, and loyalty strengthened her resolve. She would not abandon Jacob. She would find a way to return and restore the happiness she had helped bring to his life. As evening settled, the city lights glimmered, casting long shadows over the streets. Marcus remained in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moving purposefully through the streets, each step carrying her promise. The fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope hung in the air, poised for confrontation, understanding, and the restoration of joy and trust in Jacob's world. The following morning, the Blackwood mansion felt unusually still. Marcus Blackwood stood in the study, gazing at the city skyline beyond the towering windows. The grandeur of the marble floors and polished wood, the gleam of chandeliers, and the perfectly maintained gardens below all felt meaningless compared to the absence of Maya William. Despite having sent her away, the impact of her presence and her absence was undeniable. She had brought a rare joy into Jacob's life, one that neither wealth nor structure could replicate, and Marcus now realized the depth of what he had dismissed in his anger. Jacob sat quietly at the breakfast table, his small hands clutching the stuffed bear that had accompanied him through so many lonely mornings. His eggs had grown cold, and the toast had hardened, but he barely noticed. His eyes, wide and somber, reflected a longing that no one in the mansion had been able to fill since Maya had left. The nurses moved softly around him, offering comforting words, but the emptiness remained. Jacob missed Maya, her laughter, her guidance, and the way she made him feel alive rather than restrained. Marcus paced the study, each step echoing across the marble. The images of yesterday, the blood on Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling, the push against the wall kept replaying in his mind. Anger had driven his actions, but now guilt and reflection had taken its place. He remembered the accident vividly, the crash, the sirens, Sarah's hand slipping from his own, Jacob hooked to monitors, and the heroism of Maya's late husband, who had sacrificed himself for Marcus. Those memories intertwined with the realization that he had failed to see what truly mattered. He stopped at the window, gazing down at the gardens. Everything was in order, yet the perfection felt hollow. Jacob's happiness, the laughter that had once filled the halls, could not be replicated by rules or control. Maya had understood this instinctively, even in the face of her own suffering, and Marcus now recognized that her courage and selflessness had been an invaluable gift. Outside, Maya walked through the quiet streets, her bag heavy over her shoulder. The crisp autumn air reminded her of the confrontation, the shove, the humiliation she had endured, but she drew strength from her promise to Sarah. She would care for Jacob, no matter the obstacles. She had endured illness and grief before, and she would endure this as well. She would return to the boy who depended on her, and she would not fail. Back in the mansion, Marcus approached Jacob's room once more. The boy was sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at the floor. Marcus knelt beside him, voice quieter than usual. "Jacob, I need you to understand something," he said. Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I wanted Maya to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away because I was angry, because I thought I was protecting you. But I realize now that I may have been wrong. Happiness, joy, they cannot be dictated by rules alone. You need them, and I failed to see that." Jacob clutched his stuffed bear tightly. I want her to come back," he murmured. Marcus reached out, resting a hand lightly on Jacob's shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he said softly, "but I am beginning to understand, and I promise I will think carefully about what comes next." Jacob's eyes searched his father's hope and vulnerability intertwining. "Please, Daddy, she's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded slowly. The weight of truth pressed on him. He could not yet summon the courage to call Maya back, but he knew he had to confront his pride, anger, and the memories that had driven him to push her away. The mansion felt colder, emptier, and the lesson was undeniable. Protection without understanding is nothing but imprisonment. Outside, Maya rested on a park bench, letting the cool autumn air fill her lungs. Every memory of Sarah, every promise, every act of courage and love fortified her resolve. She would not abandon Jacob. She would find a way to return, to protect him, and to nurture the happiness he deserved. As night fell, the city lights flickered on, casting a warm glow over the streets. Marcus remained in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moving steadily through the quiet avenues, each step a commitment to her vow. The fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope hung in the air, poised for confrontation, understanding, and the gradual restoration of joy and trust in Jacob's world. The morning sun rose softly over the Blackwood mansion, casting long, warm rays across the marble floors and gilded walls. Marcus Blackwood sat in the study, sipping his coffee slowly, eyes fixed on the skyline beyond the tall windows. The house, usually alive with the rhythm of activity, felt suffocatingly empty. Maya Williams' absence lingered like a shadow, a constant reminder of the confrontation, her courage, and the laughter she had brought to his son. He had sent her away in anger, yet the mansion itself seemed to mourn her absence. Jacob sat quietly at the breakfast table, poking at his eggs and toast without enthusiasm. His hands rested lightly on the table, fingers fidgeting with the edge of his napkin. His eyes were wide, reflecting the void left by Maya's departure. Even the gentle chatter of the nurses could not reach him. The warmth, guidance, and joy Maya had provided were missing, leaving only the hollow echo of silence. Marcus finally rose, pacing the study with measured steps. Anger had driven him to send Maya away, but guilt and reflection now mingled with that fury. He thought of the previous day, the blood on Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, her desperate pleading, and the courage she had shown. He could not shake the memory of Jacob's laughter, bright and pure, which had echoed in the room like a fragile promise. He had dismissed her, yet the emptiness in the mansion confirmed the error of his judgment. Outside, Maya walked steadily along the quiet streets, her bag heavy on her shoulder, body still aching from the confrontation at the mansion. Her mind replayed every detail, the shove into the wall, Marcus's harsh words, the humiliation, and the fear of leaving Jacob behind. Yet she drew strength from her promise to Sarah, her vow to care for Jacob no matter what. Her own illness, the grief she had endured, and the hardships she had survived, gave her resilience. She would return to Jacob. She would keep her promise. She would protect him. Marcus entered Jacob's room, kneeling beside his son, voice quieter than usual, careful not to overwhelm. "Jacob, I need you to understand something," he said. Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I I wanted Maya to stay, he whispered. She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal. Marcus swallowed, the weight of his realization heavy. I know, he admitted. I sent her away in anger, thinking I was protecting you. But I see now that I may have been wrong. Happiness cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need it. Jacob's lip quivered as he held his stuffed bear tight. I want her to come back, he said softly. Marcus rested a tentative hand on Jacob's shoulder. I don't know yet if that can happen, he admitted, but I am beginning to understand. And I promise, I will consider what comes next very carefully. Jacob's eyes glimmered with hope. Please, Daddy, she's the only one who makes me feel happy. Marcus nodded, acknowledging the truth in his son's words. He could not yet bring Maya back, but he knew he had to confront his pride, anger, and the memories of loss that had driven him to dismiss her. The mansion felt colder, emptier, a silent testament to what he had failed to see, that love and joy could not be replaced by wealth or control. Outside, Maya rested briefly on a park bench, closing her eyes against the crisp autumn air. Every memory of Sarah, every promise, and every act of courage reinforced her determination. Though sent away, she would not abandon Jacob. She would find a way back to restore the happiness and warmth he deserved. As evening descended, the city lights flickered on, bathing the streets in soft gold. Marcus remained in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moving purposefully through the quiet avenues, each step a commitment to her vow. The fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope lingered in the air, poised for confrontation, understanding, and the gradual restoration of joy and trust in Jacob's life. The morning sun painted the Blackwood mansion in soft gold, filtering through the tall windows and casting long shadows across the marble floors. Marcus Blackwood moved through the halls with a restless energy, the quiet of the house pressing against him like a tangible weight. Maya Williams' absence was still keenly felt, the echo of her laughter and the warmth she had brought to Jacob's life haunting every corridor. He had dismissed her in anger, yet the emptiness she left behind refused to be ignored. Jacob sat at the breakfast table, fingers tracing the edge of his plate, eyes distant and somber. His eggs had grown cold, and the toast sat untouched. The nurses moved softly around him, offering gentle reassurances, but nothing could fill the void. Maya's absence had created a silence that was both physical and emotional, a gap in his daily life that no one else could bridge. Marcus paused in the hallway, glancing at Jacob. He remembered the events of the previous days, the blood from his son's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, her courage, and the unrelenting care she had given. Anger had dictated his decisions, but now guilt and reflection mingled with it, making the house feel colder, emptier. He realized that Jacob needed more than rules and protection. He needed joy, freedom, and companionship, the very things Maya had offered even at the cost of her own comfort and pride. Outside the mansion, Maya walked steadily through the quiet streets, the cool autumn air brushing against her face. Each step reminded her of the confrontation, the shove, the humiliation, but also of her promise to Sarah, to care for Jacob, to ensure his happiness, no matter the obstacles. Her own illness, her grief, and the challenges she had endured only strengthened her resolve. She would return to Jacob. She would not fail. Marcus entered Jacob's room, kneeling beside his son. Jacob, I know you miss Maya, he said softly. Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I wanted her to stay, he whispered. She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal. Marcus swallowed, the weight of realization pressing on him. I know, he admitted. I sent her away in anger, thinking I was protecting you. But I see now that happiness cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need it. Jacob clutched his stuffed bear tightly. I want her to come back, he said, voice trembling. Marcus reached out a tentative hand, resting it lightly on Jacob's shoulder. I don't know yet if that can happen, he admitted, but I am beginning to understand, and I promise. I will consider what comes next very carefully. Jacob's eyes searched his father's hope and vulnerability intertwined. Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes me feel happy. Marcus nodded slowly. He could not yet bring Maya back, but he understood that wealth and authority could not replace love, trust, and the simple joy she had given his son. Meanwhile, Maya rested on a park bench, letting the crisp air fill her lungs. Memories of Sarah, the promise she had made, and her courage reinforced her determination. Though she had been sent away, she would not abandon Jacob. Every step, every breath, every choice would bring her closer to fulfilling the vow she had made, to return, to protect, and to nurture the happiness he deserved. As the afternoon light waned, Marcus remained in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya walking purposefully through the quiet city streets. All three were caught in a fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope, poised for the confrontation, understanding, and eventual restoration of trust and joy in Jacob's life. The morning air was crisp and sharp, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and distant coffee shops. Maya William walked briskly along the quiet streets, her leather bag weighing heavily against her shoulder, yet her resolve remained unshaken. Every step reminded her of the confrontation at the Blackwood mansion, the shove into the wall, the harsh words, the humiliation, and yet, beneath it all, her promise to Sarah pulsed steadily in her chest. She would care for Jacob, she would protect his happiness, she would not falter. Inside the mansion, Marcus Blackwood moved through the halls, with the restless energy of a man haunted. The silence of the house pressed in on him, each step echoing off the polished marble floors. Jacob's absence from the breakfast table, his eggs untouched, his toast cold, was a sharp reminder of the void left by Maya. The boy had missed her, and Marcus felt it as acutely as if it were a wound on his own chest. He paused at the window, staring down at the gardens below. Everything was immaculate, perfect, under his control, but perfection meant nothing without laughter, without joy, without the warmth that Maya had brought. Marcus's mind replayed every detail of the past days, the blood on Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling, her apology, and her courage. Anger had driven his decisions, but now guilt and reflection mingled with it, creating a hollow ache that no wealth or authority could mask. Jacob sat quietly in his room, his small hands clutching a stuffed bear. The boy's eyes were wide, filled with a mixture of longing and sadness. He missed Maya's presence, her laughter, her ability to make him feel like a child rather than a carefully controlled project. His lower lip trembled as he whispered to himself, "I just want her back." Marcus finally approached Jacob's room, kneeling beside his son. "Jacob, I know you miss Maya," he said softly. The boy's eyes flickered up, hope mingling with sorrow. I wanted her to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away yesterday because I was angry, because I thought I was protecting you. But I realize now that I may have been wrong. Happiness, joy, they cannot be dictated by rules alone. You need it." Jacob clutched his bear tighter. I want her to come back," he said softly. Marcus reached out, placing a tentative hand on Jacob's shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he admitted. "But I am beginning to understand, and I promise, I will consider what comes next very carefully." Jacob's eyes searched his father's, hope and vulnerability intertwined. "Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded, acknowledging the truth in his son's words. He could not yet summon the courage to call Maya back, but he knew that the absence of her warmth and guidance had left a void in Jacob's life that wealth and authority could not fill. The mansion, cold and silent, was a stark reminder of the human needs he had failed to recognize. Meanwhile, Maya found a quiet bench in a small park. She sat down heavily, letting the cool air brush against her face. Her mind replayed the promise she had made to Sarah and the courage she had summoned in the face of hardship. Despite being sent away, she would not abandon Jacob. Every step she had taken, every hardship endured, strengthened her resolve to return and restore the happiness she had brought to the boy's life. By evening, the city lights flickered on, casting a warm glow across the streets. Marcus remained in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moving steadily through the quiet avenues. All three were caught in a delicate balance of anger, regret, and hope, poised for the confrontation, understanding, and eventual restoration of joy and trust in Jacob's life. The sun rose slowly over the city, painting the Blackwood mansion in soft hues of gold and amber. Marcus Blackwood moved through the halls with a restless energy, each echoing step a reminder of the emptiness that had settled over the house. Maya Williams' absence lingered like a shadow. Her laughter, courage, and the joy she had brought to Jacob's life were painfully missing. He had sent her away in anger. Yet the void she left was undeniable, and the silence of the mansion pressed heavily on him. Jacob sat at the breakfast table, his small hands clutching his stuffed bear tightly. His eggs were cold, toast untouched, and his gaze was distant, reflecting the emptiness left by Maya. The nurses moved about quietly, offering soft reassurances, but nothing could replace the warmth, guidance, and companionship she had provided. Jacob missed her the way she made him feel alive, happy, and unafraid to be himself. Marcus paused in the hallway, looking toward his son. The images of the previous days, the blood from Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, her courageous attempts to comfort him flashed in his mind. Anger had dictated his decisions, but now, guilt and reflection weighed more heavily. He realized Jacob needed more than rules and protection. He needed joy, freedom, and companionship, the very things Maya had given him, even at the cost of her own comfort and dignity. Outside, Maya walked steadily through the quiet streets, leather bags slung over her shoulder. Each step reminded her of the confrontation, the shove against the wall, the harsh words, and the humiliation she had endured. Yet beneath it all, her promise to Sarah pulsed steadily. She would care for Jacob, protect his happiness, and honor the vows she had made. Her illness, her past losses, and the hardships she had survived only strengthened her resolve. She would return, no matter the obstacles. Inside the mansion, Marcus entered Jacob's room, kneeling beside his son. "Jacob, I know you miss Maya," he said softly. Jacob looked up. Hope mingled with sadness in his eyes. I wanted her to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." Marcus swallowed hard. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away in anger because I thought I was protecting you. But I realize now that I may have been wrong. Happiness, joy, cannot be dictated by rules alone. You need them." Jacob clutched his stuffed bear tighter. I want her to come back," he murmured. Marcus placed a tentative hand on his shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he said quietly, "but I am beginning to understand. And I promise, I will consider what comes next, very carefully." Jacob's eyes searched his father's face. "Please, Daddy, she's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded slowly. He could not yet call Maya back, but he understood that her absence left a void that wealth, authority, and order could never fill. The mansion felt colder, emptier, a stark reminder that love, joy, and connection could not be manufactured, they had to be nurtured, and sometimes courage and sacrifice were required to provide them. Outside, Maya rested briefly on a park bench. The cool air brushed her cheeks as she closed her eyes and let memories of Sarah, promises made, and her own courage guide her thoughts. Though sent away, she refused to abandon Jacob. Every hardship she had endured, every step taken in his care, strengthened her resolve. She would return. She would protect him. She would restore the happiness he deserved. As evening settled over the city, the mansion remained quiet. Marcus sat alone in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moved steadily through the quiet streets, each step a commitment to her promise. The fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope lingered, poised for confrontation, understanding, and the restoration of trust and joy in Jacob's life. The early morning sunlight spilled into the Blackwood mansion, illuminating the polished marble floors and the towering windows. Marcus Blackwood moved through the halls with measured steps, the quiet of the house pressing heavily on him. Maya Williams' absence was a constant reminder of the confrontation, her courage, and the laughter she had brought to Jacob's life. He had sent her away in anger, but the void she left could not be ignored. The mansion, for all its grandeur, felt hollow without her presence. Jacob sat quietly in his room, wrapped in a blanket, his small hands clutching the stuffed bear that had become his constant companion. His breakfast remained untouched, and his eyes were distant, reflecting the emptiness created by Maya's departure. The nurses moved silently, offering gentle reassurances, but their presence could not replace the warmth, guidance, and joy Maya had provided. He missed her, missed the laughter and freedom she had given him, and the comfort of knowing he was seen and understood. Marcus paused in the hallway, thinking of the previous days, the blood from Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, her courageous care, and the way she had insisted on giving Jacob happiness even at risk to herself. Anger had dictated his actions, but now guilt and reflection mingled with it, revealing the depth of what he had overlooked. He realized Jacob needed more than rules and protection. He needed joy, companionship, and the freedom to simply be a child, the very things Maya had provided. Outside, Maya walked briskly along the quiet streets, her bag heavy on her shoulder. Each step reminded her of the confrontation at the mansion, the shove against the wall, Marcus's harsh words, and the humiliation, but her promise to Sarah strengthened her resolve. She had vowed to care for Jacob, to protect his happiness, and she would not falter. Her illness and past hardships had prepared her for this moment. She would return to Jacob and ensure he experienced the joy he deserved. Inside the mansion, Marcus entered Jacob's room, kneeling beside his son. "Jacob, I know you miss Maya," he said softly. Jacob's eyes flickered up, hope mingling with sadness. I wanted her to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." "No," Marcus swallowed, the weight of his realization pressing heavily on him. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away because I was angry, thinking I was protecting you. But I now see that happiness cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need joy, and I failed to recognize that." Jacob clutched his stuffed bear tightly. I want her to come back," he said softly. Marcus placed a tentative hand on Jacob's shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he admitted, "but I am beginning to understand, and I promise I will think carefully about what comes next." Jacob's eyes searched his father's face, hope and vulnerability shining through. "Please, Daddy. She's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded slowly. He could not yet summon the courage to call Maya back, but he understood that her absence had left a void that wealth and authority could never fill. The mansion felt colder, emptier, and the lesson was undeniable. Protection without understanding was imprisonment. True care required humility, empathy, and the courage to acknowledge mistakes. Outside, Maya rested briefly on a park bench. The autumn air brushed against her cheeks as she closed her eyes, letting the memories of Sarah, her promise, and her own courage guide her thoughts. Though sent away, she would not abandon Jacob. Every hardship endured, every step taken to protect him, strengthened her resolve. She would return, she would nurture his happiness, and she would restore the warmth that had been temporarily lost. As night fell, the city lights flickered to life, casting a golden glow over the streets. Marcus remained in the study, Jacob asleep upstairs, and Maya moved steadily through the quiet avenues, each step a commitment to her vow. The fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope lingered, poised for confrontation, understanding, and the eventual restoration of joy and trust in Jacob's life. The morning sun rose slowly over the Blackwood mansion, casting golden light across the polished marble floors and gilded walls. Marcus Blackwood stood in the study, hands clasped behind his back, staring at the distant skyline. The mansion, grand and imposing, felt emptier than ever. Maya Williams' absence lingered like a shadow, a reminder of her courage, the laughter she had brought Jacob, and the confrontation that had driven her away. Marcus had sent her away in anger, but the void she left was undeniable, and the silence pressed heavily on him. Jacob sat at the breakfast table, small hands clutching his stuffed bear. The eggs and toast sat untouched, his gaze distant, filled with longing and sadness. The nurses moved quietly, offering soft reassurances, but the absence of Maya's warmth and guidance had left a void that could not be filled. He missed her, the laughter, the joy, the freedom she had allowed him to feel, and the comfort of being truly seen and understood. Marcus paused in the hallway, thinking of the past days. The blood on Jacob's forehead, Maya's trembling apologies, her unwavering courage, and the care she had shown despite the dangers. Anger had dictated his actions, but now guilt and reflection mingled with it. He realized that Jacob needed more than rules and protection. He needed joy, companionship, and the ability to simply be a child. Maya had provided all of this, even at risk to herself. Outside, Maya walked briskly through the quiet streets, her bag heavy, yet her resolve unshaken. She recalled the shove against the wall, Marcus's harsh words, and the humiliation she had endured, but her promise to Sarah burned strong in her heart. She would care for Jacob. She would protect his happiness. She would not fail him. Her own illness, grief, and hardships had prepared her for this moment. She would return. Marcus entered Jacob's room, kneeling beside his son. "Jacob, I know you miss Maya," he said softly. Jacob looked up, hope flickering in his eyes. I wanted her to stay," he whispered. "She makes me happy. She makes me feel normal." Marcus swallowed, the weight of his realization pressing heavily. "I know," he admitted. "I sent her away because I was angry, thinking I was protecting you. But happiness, joy, they cannot be dictated by rules or authority alone. You need it." Jacob clutched his stuffed bear tightly. I want her to come back," he murmured. Marcus placed a hand lightly on his shoulder. "I don't know yet if that can happen," he admitted, "but I am beginning to understand, and I promise, I will do everything I can to make things right." Jacob's eyes searched his father's, hope and vulnerability shining through. "Please, Daddy, she's the only one who makes me feel happy." Marcus nodded slowly, the truth undeniable. He could no longer rely on pride or anger. Wealth and control could never replace love, joy, and human connection. The mansion felt colder, emptier, and Marcus knew the time had come to make amends. Outside, Maya rested briefly on a park bench, letting the crisp autumn air brush against her face. She closed her eyes, drawing on memories of Sarah, her promise, and her own courage. Despite being sent away, she would not abandon Jacob. Every step she had taken, every hardship endured, strengthened her resolve. She would return. She would restore the happiness she had nurtured and keep the promise she had made to Sarah. By afternoon, Marcus stood at the front gate of the mansion, waiting. His heart pounded as Maya appeared on the sidewalk, walking toward him with steady determination. He took a deep breath and stepped forward. The pride that had once dominated him softened by understanding and humility. "Maya," he began, voice low but sincere. I was wrong. I sent you away, and I should have trusted you. Jacob, he needs you. I need you in his life, and in ours." Maya paused, her eyes glistening, and then nodded slowly. "I never left him in my heart, sir. I promised Sarah I would care for him, and I will. I only ever wanted him to be happy." Marcus extended his hand. "Come back, be with him, be part of this family, if you will let me make amends." Tears filled Maya's eyes as she placed her hand in his. I will," she whispered. Jacob ran from the mansion, laughter spilling from his lips as he leapt into Maya's arms. Marcus watched, a rare smile breaking across his face, as the sound of joy filled the halls once more. The mansion, once empty and cold, seemed to come alive again, the fragile balance of anger, regret, and hope finally tipping toward healing, love, and restoration. In that moment, Marcus understood fully what Sarah had trusted him with, what Maya had risked everything to uphold, and what true protection meant. It was not control, not wealth, not rules, but love, courage, and the willingness to trust in those who cared most. The day closed with laughter echoing through the mansion, the golden light bathing father, son, and Maya in warmth. For the first time in years, Marcus felt the house and his life truly complete. The story teaches us that true protection and love are not about control, wealth, or authority. They are about understanding, trust, and compassion. Pride and anger can blind us to what really matters, but courage, selflessness, and keeping promises can restore joy, heal wounds, and strengthen bonds. Sometimes, letting go of rigid control is the greatest act of care we can offer to those we love.